My name is Jovan Vidic and I work as a software developer in CodeCentric. We call that IT consultant, but actually it is software developer. And today I'm going to speak with you about JavaScript refactoring and about best practices in JavaScript development. So I'm not going to speak about some hype topics like AngularJS, Backbone, or something else. I will go a little back and speak about how to make a good JavaScript architecture. And before I start, I want to speak with you about one thing that recently happened in my team. So after one of the daily stand-ups, my colleague approached to me and said, okay, I think that we really abused word refactoring. And I said, how so? Well, it happens that every time when we are on daily stand-up, someone says, I refactored something and I'm going to refactor something. So for the last time, I'm going to abuse this word and speak about refactoring. For the beginning, I will speak about my motivation to create this talk, about my experience with JavaScript. After that, I want to introduce everything by speaking about should we refactor JavaScript. I will show you a real-life example, and I will show you what you can do after you have a JavaScript application which is developed on good way. Let's start with a legacy project. That is the project that I started to work on in 2007. And it was some kind of Java on the backend and DWR used for Ajax calls. It has over 700 JavaScript files and it has over 20,000 lines of code written in JavaScript, so not in Java. I would say that that was a very big project. We did some things wrong, we did some good things there, and we learned a lot. So what was wrong? We had JavaScript inline in HTML, a lot of JavaScript inline in HTML. Also, we had global functions, which is bad. We had inline styles, not only inline in HTML. We also used style names in JavaScript code. We didn't have code style guidelines, and we didn't have tests for Java and for JavaScript. But that application worked. What was good at that point? So we used object-oriented approach for bigger part of system. Yeah, we had that global functions, but we used object-oriented approach for all other things that we developed new. Also, we were throwing our own exceptions. So that was actually very good practice, and it helped us a lot. We were wrapping third-party libraries. That was good because we were able to replace, for example, what you get editor with less than hour invested in that. And we used prototype.js. That was very good at that time. Yes, we could use jQuery, but prototype.js offered us opportunity to work with JavaScript in object-oriented way. That project is still alive. Still it is in production. It is in some kind of maintenance mode. That company does not invest money in it, but it still works. So the question is, should we refactor JavaScript? We have legacy code. Should we start writing from the beginning, use something like Angular, Backbone, or whatever, or we should think about refactoring our existing application? You don't need to refactor, but I think that you will know what will happen at the end. You will need to just rewrite the application or just turn off that project and work on something else. So what is refactoring by definition? This is not refactoring. This is rebuilding from the beginning. And we should not rebuild JavaScript applications. Maybe it seems so easy to do that because you can just use Angular and do some cool things, and why would you refactor everything that you have? Well, by the definition of refactoring, we should have code that is easier to understand and cheaper to modify. And it is not cheap to rewrite whole application. Also, we should not change observable behavior. So user should not know that we are refactoring. Quick introduction for Java developers. So for you who haven't worked on JavaScript or haven't worked on JavaScript stack, I will just show you what do you have in JavaScript, and I will show you some parallels to Java tools. First of all, I used for this application Node.js. Node.js is built on top of Google's JavaScript engine, and on top of Node.js you have a lot of useful tools. Second tool that I'm going to use is JSLint. JSLint is static code analysis tool. It will help you a lot when you're starting with JavaScript because it will show you what mistakes are you making. After that, I'm going to show you WebDriver IO. It is Selenium implementation for writing Selenium test in Node.js. Also, next thing that I'm going to show you is Required.js. It is a library that allows you to write modules in JavaScript. Bower is a dependency manager, so something similar to Maven, for those of you who are using Java. That part of Maven where you are handling dependency management. Jasmine and Karma. Jasmine is a behavior-driven test framework, so something similar to JBehave, for example, or JUnit. I don't know how to make parallel to Karma in Java, but Karma is test runner, so it enables you to run tests. And at the end, I will show you Grunt as a task runner, maybe most similar to End. So those are the tools that will be used for this refactoring and one very important library. I will show you application just in few minutes. Before I do that, I created legacy application with all bad practices that I could remember. So here is the example. I have inline JavaScript code in HTML. First bad practice. Second bad practice, I have a lot of JavaScript imports in HTML. So I don't have one file that is minified, uglified, or easy to use. What's the problem with that? Where you are creating a lot of requests to your server. Also, again, I have inline JavaScript code in HTML. And just imagine this is an example, but if you have hundreds of HTML files, hundreds of JavaScript files, it will be very hard for you to maintain that application. Now we have whole application in one JavaScript file. Again, think about application with 700, 1000 JavaScript files. What's wrong here? First of all, I'm using inline URLs. Second, what you can see, variable name is just data, so code is unreadable. I'm using CSS style names in HTML. I'm accessing DOM elements every time when I need it. I don't have some global variable, for example, to access that. I'm deciding which request I'm going to use in one line of code. I'm using inline JavaScript object definition, so that JSON is defined in one line. And what's the worst thing that can happen is that you can have one property defined 2 times. Because I don't have strict check. If you enable strict check, then browser will complain and will not allow you to do that. But still, I cannot reuse this part of code. What else I did wrong? I have callback function that I need to write every time because it is inline, and I'm just clearing my form. So, all in all, this is complete mess. And how should you start? What should you do first? First thing that I would recommend is to start writing Selenium test for a whole application. So if you remember, by definition, we should not change observable behavior of our application. So let's try to cover that with a test and see how it will work. So I'm going to show you that. And I'm going to show you how it looks like when you run one test. It looks like that internet connection does not work. Or at least how I expect it to work. Okay, now it looks better. So this is edit form. Before that I had add, and at the end I'm testing delete. So as you can see, all tests are green. We have only 3 tests because it is very small application, but you can imagine if you have bigger, Selenium tests will provide you opportunity to cover everything what user can see. That's Selenium. And so when you have Selenium test, you are ready to continue. And what about JSLint that I mentioned? JSLint will do static code analysis. So he will tell you what you're doing wrong. Just remember, we are having a legacy JavaScript application. Selenium will scream at you. It will tell you what you did wrong. It will tell you everything what you could do wrong in JavaScript. He will tell you about namespaces, about variable names, about how you use JavaScript. It will just show you so many errors. But that's good, because then you will know what should you change. So what would I recommend as a first step? We have our Selenium test, that is testing applications, so we can do some changes in code. I would recommend make small changes. Do not change everything at once. First thing, I'm going to introduce require.js. So require.js will allow you to have library management, module management in JavaScript. So if we consider that this is part of some big application, we can say we want to refactor only one part, not everything. And what we are going to do is we'll remove all JavaScript imports that we had, and we'll have only import for require.js. Require.js has something, you can see it here, data main, which will tell you something similar to main method in Java. This is first JavaScript file that will be executed. It has some configuration, and for my example, I just used jQuery and Bootstrap and defined dependencies. So not only that you can create your own modules, but you can create dependencies between those modules. How this can help? Here is the entry point now to our application. I'm using speakers module that I will show you later. And I'm using Bootstrap, but because Bootstrap is dependent from jQuery, I loaded jQuery. What I did in my main method is that I removed the JavaScript codes from HTML. So click handler is now defined in JavaScript, and I'm calling load all method that I had before. Now we have new speakers.js file, and the first thing that you can see is that we are having some kind of definition of module. We say that this module is dependent from jQuery and dependent from new module that we have. It is called theme. So first refactoring is let's remove style names from JavaScript code. Why? Because it will be very easy to change. And you can see that here. So I have now constants for style names, and I'm using it in my code. It will be very easy to change, for example, style name for table. This table can be used across the system. So you have only one place to change. Second thing, every module that you write needs to export something. Usually that is object. So because we had that public global functions, I just decided to create one singleton JavaScript module, and I will export it. It is speakers controller. Everything else inside of that is still that old junk code, just with one change, that is that everything what is now in controller is actually handled on that way. So we are calling controller actions. And that is first part. So we isolated one part of code that we want to test. If that application is very big, then you can say, okay, I want to refactor and I want to improve only that part that I isolated. Nothing else. Everything else stays the same. And what else you can do where your colleagues can continue work on writing new modules. They don't need to write old messy JavaScript files like they did before. Now the question is, if I did that, can I start writing unit tests? No. Yes, you can, but you have still that old code, that junk that you created, and if you want to introduce testing library, you will add more JavaScript files, and you will need to care about their dependencies. So you will introduce a new mess, but you want to refactor and you want to improve. What can you do? You can start to manage your dependencies. How can you do that? With Bower. And you can see here that Bower is doing something very, very similar to Maven. So you just defined which dependency you are going to use in which version. I could remove jQuery here, and it will be still it will be loaded. But it will be loaded by dependency that is used by Bootstrap. And I want to know which version of jQuery I'm using. You can do a lot of things with that. For example, you can define that you are using 1.11 whatever, and it will download for you latest version 1.11 whatever it is. So now you can remove all the JS libraries that you had in code, and you should not commit them into your code repository. You can use them just with one command. They will be downloaded, but every developer would need to run that. Similar, what are you doing with Maven? And I have example for that. So first one, I removed my libraries and my test should fail. And that's beauty of having Selenium tests. Or at least I... Yeah, sorry, just a second. Okay, this should work. Yeah, I'm running tests, and because I removed libraries, my tests will fail. So what should I do next? I have Bower, and I will tell you install libraries. And Bower will do that. It will install libraries and it will resolve dependencies. Now, as you can see, I haven't changed anything in code, and I can run my test again. And it works. Okay, I just need to remove this because we don't need. So you can see all tests are green. We are done. We managed dependencies, and now we have good starting point, because now, for example, we know which version of jQuery we are using. We know what will change if we want to have something new, which depends from jQuery. What should we do next? We should improve design of our code, because our code is very coupled to the jQuery, very coupled to the model on the server side. So if you change something on server side, client will fail, and that's really bad. So what I did is I introduced view model object that will actually help me to separate concerns. I will not care about model on server, and I will have something what can I reuse in all views, not only in one with that inline jQuery definition. What's interesting here, this is also required JS module, but I didn't have enough space to put it in code. I'm using some kind of namespacing pattern in JavaScript. This is actually JavaScript object, just one of the ways how you can write and have something similar to namespacing. And our speakers model now looks a bit different. We have new model import. We have method which will convert data that we retrieved from server. It will convert it to model view object that we know how to use in our application. And how it looks, so we still have that code that is not so nice, but now we have variable names that are meaningful, and we are doing that conversion. So now if something changed on server side, it will not affect whole application, only one smaller part, it is this method. And Another benefit that you can see, so I have full name method. I don't need to have speaker first name plus speaker last name. So I'm writing less code. And I have something to test for the first time. Usually in Java, I would not recommend to test model objects because they don't have a lot of things to be tested and you have compiler. But in JavaScript, if you remove one property, it can happen that you cannot see that change. And it would affect you maybe in production. If you want, you can test it. I choose for this presentation Jasmine as a test framework because it has that behavior-driven style. One specific thing when you are testing require.js modules is that you need to do import before each test case. You will be able to download this example. You have a lot of tests. You will see only one for this screen. So I'm testing if I create Spreaker object is full name method returning what I'm expecting. And that's first test. What's important now is that we don't have some kind of build automation tool, but we still can execute tests. And for that, we are using HTML page. And as you can see, I have 4 tests. They are all executed and they are all passing. So it is some first point how you can test. This is not the best way, but just remember you are refactoring in, for example, small iterations. You have a lot of work to do on your project. You cannot just say, I will refactor everything because it is super cool to have Jasmine on the project. Okay. So our application is now testable. And probably you're thinking now, yeah, that's all cool, but you have still a lot of junk code. And if you're thinking that, yeah, you're right. We need to do a lot of new things, and we need to improve. And we are going now to final part. Actually, what is the most important thing? We will improve design and we will automate everything. What is the first thing that I would recommend? If you remember, we are using Ajax calls in code. What can we do is that we can extract that in separate client library. This will allow us not only to have all Ajax calls at one place, but if you want, for example, to use HTML5 storage instead of those Ajax calls, you can just say, okay, I will implement new library. I don't care, because now project knows how to manage dependencies. What's new here? I extracted that URL that we used in line. I extracted it to the configuration file, and load all speakers looks a little bit different. It just covers loading data and handling it back. There is a way to do that on much better way with promises, but that is much advanced JavaScript, so I'm not going to speak today about that. What else? If you remember, we had, again, inline JavaScript calls. And if you have that on so many places in system, then it's almost impossible to change. What should you do is to introduce facet pattern. That will allow you to have only one entry point to your system. And our facet pattern actually depends from one client library. But if you want to have access to the LinkedIn, you'll just implement another client library, put it as a dependency, and implement here. And the rest of the system will know only about that facet that you're exporting. So it is very easy to change, and with this pattern you can very easily switch from, for example, from Ajax calls to the backbone or to AngularJS, whatever you want. You isolated everything what are backend calls into one single class. Okay, and now we have something to test. With new dependencies introduced, we have a problem with mocking. So we don't want to have integration tests, we want to have unit tests. I managed to find one library that will actually allow us to mock require.js dependencies. So what am I going to do is create spy object in Jasmine, similar to Mockito or whatever you're using in Java. And I will say, whenever you call this module, I will pass you this mock. And now dependency is injected. And how it looks, when you create one simple test, whenever you call load speakers, I'm just testing is that method executed with that parameter. And that's all. You tested one module. You will have on the GitHub examples how to test all modules. It is not that I covered everything with unit tests, but I covered a lot in order to have some kind of report. What next? So backend is now isolated. What you can do with your frontend? One of the good things that I learned from Vadim is that you can use MVP pattern, and you can use it on a really good way. You can learn more about how it looks, but actually what happens is that you have presenter what is something similar to mediator pattern. So it just doesn't care about model, doesn't care about view. How it looks. Here is our presenter, new module that we introduced. And as you can see, it depends from backend. It depends from view. This actually should not be. And you can have some kind of factory method that will provide you that view. But I thought that it will be easier for you to understand what happens if I do that. And I created some kind of primitive event bus mechanism. This is not something what would you do in production. You will use maybe something like knockout, maybe you would create more advanced library, but this will show how it works. So we have event manager, and we have actions. We also have events, but they are not visible now. Actions are something that is required, for example, to call backend and to retrieve data to store data. And how it works, our speaker view has variables view and self, so it has variables that are not visible outside its scope. It will not be exported, it will not be visible in some other modules. And what we are doing is that we register for event. So we don't know where this event will be fired. It can be from wherever you want in your application. But we know whenever you fire that event, this presenter will listen, call load all action, and load all action will call our backend. It doesn't know anything about jQuery, Ajax, Angular, whatever. And it will, when data is retrieved, it will call view and tell him show data. I don't know how you will show that. I don't know will you show that. I'm just passing data to you. Next component that we have view. And our view is now dependent from events, components, and two new modules that I introduced, so that pop-up that you were able to see, and some kind of common components that I created for this example. Our speaker's view does not see jQuery. It doesn't see those methods that you have in jQuery to access DOM elements. It uses more Java-like style, so I will just want to have access to the table, to the button, to the pop-up. I don't know how will you do that. What you can do with this, you can replace jQuery if you decide for some reason. This view can fire events, or in this case, fire action. Presenter listens for action, view will fire it. And what I do, I just add click listener to the button, and whenever you click to the button, it will fire event and tell our presenter, please show me speaker's view. Show method that I show you on presenter, what he will do, he'll tell, okay, I have a list of speakers, clear the table, and tell the table to add speakers. Again, we don't have any HTML, we don't have jQuery, we don't have anything. We are independent from that, and we can have implementation whatever we want. We can have some fancy table, or we have table that you implement in few hours. Speakers pop-up, new module that is, as you can see, also not dependent from jQuery. So we don't see the jQuery at all. It knows about model, it knows about events, and it knows about some kind of components. Again, I have something like generic pop-up, generic text field, and what is important here? My generic text field has some method to return me value. I don't know what is it. I don't know how that looks in DOM. What will I do? I will set the properties of my speakers object. I will use my model object, so I will ask him, do you have ID? If you have ID, I will tell, okay, I want to edit speaker. If you do not have ID, I will save speaker. And I don't know what will happen. Presenter will do that. If exists, if it is, if it listens for those events. We have one method. We have a lot of them, but one that I want to show you. This is a function that will be open view. It will set our speaker object and we will set values to input fields. But again, we don't have jQuery to do that. We have our wrapper component. So even our view is and pop-up are independent from jQuery. And what is actually dependent from jQuery? It is that components project that module that I created. How it looks? It has text field, and for that text field, I am just saying, okay, I know that I have jQuery. I will use ID of that element, and I will have some kind of jQuery-like syntax. It will just help us to wrap the component and use jQuery where we want. It is something similar to the button. I exposed event listener. I didn't want to be coupled to the jQuery listening mechanism. Maybe I want to replace that. Maybe I want to use something else. And you saw in all those steps that I provided is that now you have testable code. Everything can be mocked. Everything can be tested with unit tests. And if you download this project from GitHub, you will see that it is covered with unit tests, with Jasmine tests. You have model view presenter, you have facet pattern to access backend, and now what do you want to do? Well, probably you want to automate everything. And this is actually win on the project. So if you can automate, if you can have continuous integration, then you are sure not only that everything works, but everything works on each commit. And for this purpose, we will introduce Grunt as a task runner. I will not spend too much time explaining what is Grunt. It is easy to download and install. But what will Grunt allow you? First thing that I'm going to do with Grunt is I want to do JSLint check on all my files. So I don't want to have JavaScript files which are not written on the way how I would like to be. I don't want someone to add new file and that he can commit some junk to the repository, because build will fail. Second tool that I'm going to use is the Karma as a test runner. If you have time, I will show you how Karma configuration works, but what Karma allows you to do is to use Phantom.js to have headless unit testing and headless Selenium testing. For the example, you saw that I used Chrome to run tests, but I don't need to do that. And headless testing is a good thing because then you can run it on some kind of Linux server where you do not have X window installed. What's also a good thing about Karma is that you can run tests on multiple browsers. You can tell Karma use Chrome, Firefox, if you can IE, and Phantom.js, whatever you want. You can also Karma can create report. It can create it in JUnit format so that Jenkins can read and Jenkins can show. But also it can use it can use Istanbul plugin. That plugin is used to generate HTML report. I will show you that later. And what we are going to do now, we want to create distribution of our application. We have libraries, for example, Jasmine, that we don't need in production. So we want to remove them. We are going to copy files, and we are copying our assets, CSS, fonts, images, whatever we have, and require.js must be copied, because require.js will load all our modules. What we cannot do here, and people usually do with Grunt, we cannot use Uglify plugin, which will merge all JavaScript files into one and create uglified structure. We have something else. Require.js comes with something what is called RGS, and it is used to create one uglified file with all dependencies. What am I doing here is that I configure this plugin to know where the libraries are. All the libraries except those that are known and that we've written for our application. And I tell him, okay, when you process everything, create me one file, which is called build.js. So if you remember, at the beginning we had 3 imports, and we had a lot of requests to our server. Now we will have only 2 files, one for require.js that we must have, and second with all JavaScript files. Last step in our build process is to do some actions on our HTML files, PHP, whatever you have. We will remove all white spaces from HTML, and we will replace that main entry that we used for require.js. So at the beginning I had that main.js file, but now I have this app build.js, so I need to do that. This plugin will allow you to do that. It will allow you to do a lot of other things, not only that. And now I'm going to show you how that looks. So I'm running grunt build, and you can see, okay, I will scroll. All the lint checks are passed, so my code is okay. I have all tests executed. That's also okay. I cleaned folder, I copied files, and everything is done without errors. And here is my this folder. Sorry. I have only one JS file, index.html, and this also can be tested. What else do I have from this build? I have a report generated by Istanbul. This was the reason why I haven't covered everything with tests. I wanted to show how it looks when something is not covered, but you can browse your tests and actually see what's wrong. Very useful tool, but as I said, you can use JUnit, and if you are running everything on Jenkins, then Jenkins will show you what you can do. And we are going near to the end. So let's say that you refactored your application and that you are very satisfied how it looks. Still, it is not perfect. Still, you can do a lot of things, but you have tests, you have build automation, you're creating distribution of your application, so everything looks much better than it was before. There is a language called CoffeeScript. It is some kind of intermediate language, so you cannot just use CoffeeScript in browser, but you can compile CoffeeScript in JavaScript. If you were yesterday on that ECMAScript talk, a lot of things that you can use in CoffeeScript will be available in ECMAScript 6. So maybe it is useful for you to start writing that code. What you can see here, that this is same model class that I showed you before, but with a lot less code. What is, for me at least, interesting, if you say constructor at ID, this will actually create that assignment and property. And this is the way how can you define property. Apart from that, you can have methods, and these are class methods. These are the methods that will be exported. So I would say that around 40% code less you should write in CoffeeScript. Be careful, you cannot use CoffeeScript for everything. It is not easy to write CoffeeScript code, and sometimes maybe it is overhead. For CoffeeScript, you also have something similar to JSLint. You have CoffeeScript lint, so you can check code quality on that part, not only on JavaScript part. CoffeeScript will allow you to write code where you do not care about equals, deep equals, and you will not care about those things that are bad practices in JavaScript. it will hide that from you. What you should read and what can help you to improve your skills in refactoring JavaScript applications. I would recommend these four books. And one more thing for the end. So you saw everything what I explained in steps, and I invested a lot of effort to do that. To have Bower running, to have Karma running, to have automated tests. But what if you're starting new project and you want to have all of that? There is one very, very good tool. It's called Jovan, and it is scaffolding tool for JavaScript. You can compare that to Maven artifacts generator and Maven artifacts in Java. And how it looks when you run Jovan. So I want to start Angular application. I want to run tests. I want to have all dependencies solved, and I want to start that immediately. Jovan will ask you a few questions. Do you want to use SAS? Yes. Do you want to use Bootstrap? Yes. Yes. Okay. He'll run. He will do what he must to do. This is the beauty of Node package management. There is a lot of dependencies that will be here, but you don't need to care about them. You just need to define them if that's necessary. It's done. And you can see we have grunt file defined. We have our app folder. Bower is defined. Bower components are defined. Node is defined with their package JSON, and you can just start to write JavaScript application with option to write tests and do whatever you want. And you can create your custom scaffolds for Jovan. Yeah, that's all what I wanted to show you. Questions?
You've mentioned JSLint, as I remember, if I remember correctly, that it shows us what is wrong with our JavaScript. Can you show us, because I think I haven't seen that one, with what is telling us when it's wrong?
Yeah, sure. I forgot that, thank you. So here is our first version of our code. I'm going to run JSLint again, and you can see. Even if you are violating some kind of best practices in writing JavaScript code, JSLint will report that to you. So everything what was wrong it is reporting regarding to code style. You should run it on your project, and there is another tool that you can use. It is fork of JSLint. It is called JSHint. Many people prefer JSHint because it offers you more options to configure, and you can define false positives, false negatives, whatever you want. But for this demo, I use JSLint because it is easier to use and maybe easier to start with.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.